We're sitting down with U.S. Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota. Sir, first of all, thank you so much for doing this interview with us here in Rapid City in studio. And you recently got a big endorsement for possibly seeking re-election, though. So this interview is really coming on the heels of President Trump putting his name behind you for the 2026 race.
Well, he beat me to the punch. I haven't announced yet, but he was very kind, and I really appreciated his reaching out and offering the endorsement. I think we work well together on a number of issues. I appreciated the fact that he was focused on my interest in representing and working on behalf of the people of South Dakota again for another time period. But we'll talk more about that as it gets closer to campaign time. In the meantime, we've got lots of things going on in the United States Senate, and we've got a huge agenda that the president has laid out. So far, with the help of John Thune as the leader, it has been a phenomenal success story so far for us in the United States Senate, passing things both out of the House and the Senate that really will be key to economic development for not just South Dakota, but the entire country over the next 5-6 years.
Speaking of some of those key votes, the Defense Authorization Act, we just spoke to you over Zoom about this recently. A lot of money coming right here to the Rapid City area. So the question is, how likely is it, do you think, that you're going to get this version of it through Congress?
It is the only bill that Congress passes every single year for the last 64, 65 years. Everybody understands it's really important that we get salary policy taken care of for the men and women that wear the uniform. And this is our messaging to the Department of Defense about the information that we want feedback on and about where we intend to authorize new programs for them, where we're going to eliminate old contracts, but really moving into the next lines of defense as we face China in the Indo-Pacific region, but also Russia in the European theater, and recognizing that if we have a battle on one of those two fronts, the chances are very good that we will have a battle on two different fronts at the same time, just because of the coordinated work that they've been doing recently among them, and the fact that they know that we've been stretched pretty thin with a lot of our offensive and defensive capabilities. They're very expensive to do. Our offensive and defensive capabilities are expensive. And we're going to spend real close to about $958 billion again this coming year. But that's the most important thing that we do. Ellsworth Air Force Base is going to be a huge part of it. The B-21 will be here before it's at any other base. We can't talk yet about when you're going to see the first ones flying through, but we've got a number of them being built right now, and a number of those that are being built right now will be the ones to arrive at Ellsworth first.
So you're anticipating a lot of support for this, and again, economically, this is a lot of money coming into this area. Yeah. And I know a lot of this, like we were talking about, a lot of it is just to build the hangars that they will put these aircraft in.
Yeah, look, we have what they call a weapons generation facility. This is where you actually build the nuclear weapon. You put it together when you need to have the nuclear weapon put on an aircraft. And there are different types of nuclear weapons that you will generate at this particular facility. That alone is going to be probably over $300 million alone. You've got each one of the B-21s will be housed in some sort of they're basically a hangar. That's not what they call them, but it's basically a hangar. You're going to have an operations facility as well, and you're going to have facilities in which these pilots can actually train, simulator type training that will also go on. So all of that together, by the time we're all done, the economic, or the buildings alone, between $1.5 and $2 billion.
Getting into some of your own personal legislation, I know you've recently rolled out 2 bipartisan bills, if I'm not mistaken. I think they are both bipartisan. One looking at homelessness and how to tackle that issue. The other looking at housing, and really the two are correlated. I think
they are.
There's no disagreement there with pretty much anybody you would speak to. But we'll start with the homeless bill. You have a bill really going after homelessness, and the way I've read into this, and I'm kind of curious your take, is that it provides a lot of leeway for a lot of these providers, but it also does seem to touch accountability as well, just through what I've read.
It does, but look, what we're really doing is clean up legislation based upon what our local groups, including our local Rapid City housing groups right here when we did our roundtables, told us they needed to do to kind of cut through some of the red tape that delays the ability to make improvements in housing, whether it be housing for people that literally have no place else to go, or if you're talking about the housing which is public housing. And what we found is that NEPA, which is basically the feds coming in and telling you that you have to do environmental reforms or environmental regulatory adherence, they didn't make sense compared to what our local zoning ordinances would do. And in some cases, they wouldn't allow the states to actually enforce them to where you would have multiple types of regulations. We're streamlining that. And we're making a lot of this stuff available in a very short period of time. It's bipartisan in nature. There seems to be everybody looking at this saying, look, there's no reason why we shouldn't do it. It's if you have let's just as an example, if you have older housing right now and you want to take it apart, fix it up, but you're going to leave the same platform or the same basic structures in place, why do we have to go through and do an environmental report? What about the same thing with regard to older buildings that were commercial in nature, and you want to put those in and make housing for people that don't have homes today? Why do you have to do an environmental assessment at that stage of the game? So we're trying to clean this stuff up. Broad support. Republicans and Democrats say we've gone too far the other direction, too much red tape. Hopefully this cuts through it. It's one small part of what we're trying to get done, but a lot of our folks here in the Rapid City area and the Sioux Falls area both told us this is an area that would really help them a lot in terms of the time it takes to actually get housing either reformed, cleaned up, or new housing put in.
And just so we're specific, the bill you're talking about right now is the latter of the two bills. This is the housing bill. It seems like you feel this is a really strong solution to the housing.
It's one part of it, but the combination of these two together, focused on homelessness, but also on low income. Look, in South Dakota, just like in other areas, you still got 18% of the population here that really has a very, very difficult time. They spend over half of their income on housing. Part of that's just because we don't have enough housing. And the housing that we do have is in many cases substandard. So when we go to actually rebuild it or to clean it up, the environmental regulatory stuff basically adds additional cost to it. It's a combination of both. We're getting this not because we've had these great ideas, but because the folks who actually help to provide housing in these areas, such as Rapid City and Sioux Falls, came to us in roundtables and said, this is where you could really help us.
And I know you penned up this legislation with Senator Andy Kim, I believe, correct?
Well, part of it is with Senator Kim. Both of these two bills are with Senator Kim. And then we have additional reform legislation with Senator Tina Smith out of Minnesota that addresses more of our rural areas. And that's going to be, a lot of that is probably going to be broken into two separate bills. But all of it has to be bipartisan coming out of the Senate because it requires 60% or 60 votes in the Senate. Yeah, we've got 53 Republicans, and so if you want to do anything, you've got to have Democrat support as well. But you know, so many of those things we have in common. If you talk to the folks that represent rural parts of Minnesota, they have the same problems we do. When you talk about some of the reservation challenges we've got here, they've got some similar challenges in New Mexico. You find them also in some parts of Minnesota as well. So we work together in those areas, and it's to the betterment of everybody.
One thing I do want to touch on real fast is can you explain the burden that this does put on some of these developers that are coming in trying to build or restore housing as you're speaking about? I'm just curious what this does to the actual price tag of the housing that was once supposed to be affordable just through these environmental regulations they're trying to get through.
I can't tell you a percentage, but I can tell you that according to them, it literally adds months of waiting after you do the report until the reports are approved to be able to come back in. And money is time when it comes to production or changes in home ownership. And so what we've tried to do is to streamline this so that you don't have these months of delays when you're talking about public housing.
I want to shift gears here. One headline you cannot escape at this point is Jeffrey Epstein. There are calls to release more from the Epstein Files. The Trump administration put out its memo. It did call for grand jury testimony to be released, but the administration has not so far been too keen on releasing all of the files. I'm just curious what you make of all this, and more specifically, what the temperature of the Senate seems to be, just talking among your other members.
We've been busy on other items, and so we haven't had a lot of focus on the Epstein Files. In the House, they have really been focused on it, and in fact, they've actually called for hearings. They want a lot of different people to come back in and testify in front of them. And it got to the point where leadership over there just said, look, we're not ready to address this whole thing right now. We're going to send everybody home. And so while we're still working in the Senate right now, our friends and colleagues over on the other side of the aisle have been sent home. And it's directly because of the Epstein Files and the fact that they're not prepared to address them yet. I've talked to a number of my colleagues in the Senate, and I think the one consensus item we've got on it is disclosure is better than non-disclosure. And I think what's going to happen is for the White House to sit down and to work their way through with the Department of Justice about opening up those files, not just those that are going to a grand jury, because not everything goes to a grand jury, but literally disclosure about what's in the files. And just because somebody's name is mentioned in the files does not mean that they've done something wrong. And I think that's part of what I think the White House has been concerned about, and probably what previous White Houses have been concerned about as well, is that you could have individuals who are prominent, who might be named as being going to a party, or being in his aircraft, or on attending events with him, who are perfectly innocent, but their name gets brought in, and then people start to make assessments that are incorrect. So I think full disclosure is probably the best, but you've got to be careful to make sure that people understand that just simply having your name involved in it does not mean that you would be guilty of any of the activities that Mr. Epstein was involved with. He was bad news. He was a pedophile. He is absolutely one of those individuals that would have spent the rest of his life in jail.
Yeah, you talk about a lot of this disclosure push coming from the House, and I believe you're talking about the House Oversight Committee, right, that just subpoenaed the DOJ to release some of these files. I'm curious, I know we're in August recess, but I'm curious if you see any similar action coming from the Senate, and you see both chambers really get behind this.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that point yet. Now, there are some folks in the Senate who have said that they definitely want to see this happen. But in a lot of cases, we may very well allow the House to actually work their magic on it first. And then if they want to come to some conclusions, they can make recommendations to the Senate. In the meantime, we've got the National Defense Authorization Act we've got to get done. We've got appropriation bills that are going to be on the floor beginning this next week for the first time literally in a decade. And so we want to focus on those items right now. But we'll have to, at some point, deal with the Epstein issues.
You said something where you said disclosure is best, and I know you, and I saw this interview, I think you did an interview recently with News Nation where you talked about the fact that you anticipate that you are going to re-release the UAP Disclosure Act. This is another bill that you're going to introduce. This is something that we talk about bipartisan. Previously you had introduced this bill with Senator Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
I'm curious what kind of support you think you're going to get for this go-around, and on top of that, if you could just kind of highlight some of the key disclosure takeaways from this and what this act would actually mean for getting some of this UAP information out.
Sure. Look, UAPs are items that we don't know what they are, or we haven't been able to identify what they are. There's a pretty strong agreement, I think, among most people that have studied this, that a lot of the sightings of items, what used to be UFOs, were probably U.S. aircraft that were being developed for the stealth programs, the F-117, the F-22, the SR-71, and so forth. But there are a number of other sightings, not just visible sightings, but also radar, catches over the last 20 years that we just can't explain. We've seen objects that move, more rapidly than any of the technologies that we've ever disclosed that we have. And I've talked personally to individuals in classified settings about items, and these are people that work for some of our national contractors who just simply say, this is what I saw. I don't want to talk about it publicly, but this is what I saw and I can't explain it. We don't know if that means that this is something that another country has that we need to be really concerned about, such as China or Russia, or if this is something that it just simply is unknown, and we just don't know what it is. And that's when the folks that sometimes are identified as being conspiracy theorists will say, well, we know it's coming from another planet and so forth. I can't say that because I don't know what it is. But what I do know is that unless we get the individuals that have observed firsthand these phenomena, if they're afraid to come forward and to share it, and if that information doesn't get to the right decision makers, then we might very well have a risk out there that we haven't prepared for. That's the reason why I want full disclosure, but I want the disclosure to come in and then be looked at for national security purposes to determine what we should be able to release and what, because of developments we're doing, we can't release. I want it to be done in an organized fashion. I want responsible people to do that. But we can't have folks releasing part of information and not releasing the rest of it and just simply upsetting people. So I'd like to have some confidence, similar to what we had for John Kennedy's assassination and so forth in the 1990s. They put together a commission. That's what this commission is based on, is what we did for investigating the John Kennedy assassination in the 1990s.
Do you anticipate if this did come out, though, a lot more would make its way to the public?
I would hope so. What I've seen so far, there are questions because there are people that have shared stuff with us, information that we can't explain. But I'd rather be able to say that to people and then to say this is what we think it might be, but we don't know, rather than to have the conspiracy theorists out there talking about, woe is me, the sky is falling stuff. So I think the more we can get information out to where people aren't afraid to hear this information, the better off we're going to be. We are collecting the information now. We've set up a separate database. That has passed into law. The part that is not in law is having a commission set up to actually disseminate or to go through, filter through this, organize it, and then to be able to lay out and disclose to the American people what we've actually learned and what we simply don't know, the origins of it are.
So I'm just making sure I understand this right. So it would set up a commission in which this UAP information, some of these files, images, whatever it may be, goes to this commission. The commission decides what we can release to the public and what may be of national security concern.
That's right.
To not.
Yeah, and do it just like we did with the Kennedy Commission in the 1990s. It's not perfect, but I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it brings about more disclosure, and I think as long as that information, we don't want any of it destroyed. We don't want contractors that might have any of that to destroy any of it. We want them to know that they can deliver it and that they have an expectation that they have to deliver it to this facility or to this impoundment area.
Yeah, and I can sense your carefulness of not wanting to delve into conspiracy theories, but I am curious if you feel that lawmakers are opening up their minds a little bit on this issue and saying, because this is unknown, maybe we need to be a little bit open to where the origins of some of this these craft may be coming from.
I think there are some, but I think there's others that just say, look, I don't want to put myself out and get harassed or get laughed at because I'm saying I don't know where this is. It might be something. So I guess my position is, look, I follow the technical side of what we're doing with some of our most advanced weapon systems. That's part of my role in the United States Senate, serving on the Armed Services Committee and then also in the Intel Committee. And there are times in which the Intel Committee may very well, or the Intel community may very well be developing systems that the Armed Services, the Department of Defense, doesn't really know about. A lot of people there don't know about because it is so secret. On the other hand, there are weapon systems that are being developed by the Department of Defense that I'm fairly certain that rank and file members of the intelligence community don't know about, but they may very well have noticed or observed. And so I don't want them disclosing anything that is ours by accident, simply because of miscommunication from one department to the other. On the other hand, there are some items out there that after vetting, either they're telling us a heck of a story or they truly don't know what it is. But it is phenomenal in terms of its capabilities, in terms of speed, some of these objects, the speed at which it moves, the easy way in which it can change directions, the fact that it can be in both underwater and in the air, and it can apparently move to very, very high altitudes as well in a very short period of time. And these folks that are giving this information and with the technologies that we've got today, they're not making this stuff up. There's something there, we just don't know what it is.
I was going to say, from the sources that the way you're describing these sources, it sounds like, they have your trust and that what they're telling you is at least truth to them, for what they've seen. Yeah,
and there's no reason for them to come in to try to tell us stories. These are folks that are very, very capable. They are brilliant individuals. They fear sometimes that if their whole story got out, they'd lose their jobs. They don't want that to happen. So they'll come in and they'll visit with us in a classified setting with just one or two or three of us there. And our agreement is we will not disclose, and we won't let it get back to either the contractor that they work for or to the department that they work for.
Yeah, I do want to just close things here. Just ask you, August recess. You're back in South Dakota. What is on the agenda of Senator Mike Rounds while he's back in district?
Back to Washington right away this next week.
Oh, really?
We're not out yet. The House misbehaved, and so they sent him home. But on the Senate side, we've got a lot of work to do. John Thune has done a great job of literally mastering the amount of time we've got there, and he has pushed us as hard as any Senate has been pushed in recent memory. We've got almost double the number of nominations done before. We've done 4 vote-a-ramas, which has just simply not happened before. So a lot of my members, they're tired. But we do a lot of overnight stuff to try to get some of this stuff done, and that's tough on a number of the members. But
how do you do with those late night votes? Because sometimes I see these votes. I'm 31 years old, and I'm looking at a Congress of people. I'm going, I don't know how they do it, because by the time I hit 28, Senator, I couldn't even stay out past like 11 p.m. without yawning.
We've had a couple of days that have run 28, 29 hours easy, and 1 or 2 of them that have hit 36 hours straight. So you wear out, and look, that's not when you make your best decisions. Let's be honest.
That's what I was always curious about, is as these negotiations and these amendments are being made, and you're going late into the night. I mean, it's probably hard to keep up with all that, given the sleep deprivation of it all.
It is, but that's the reason why you need good leadership, and you need folks that are actually dotting I's and crossing T's. So that's part of what John's role is. It's what his team does, and once again, he's done a great job. But we're trying to get President Trump's agenda through. There are some areas in which we have honest disagreements. There are other areas in which we have been fully supportive of what he's done. But what they called the Big Beautiful Bill is going to be huge. It is. We did it through what we call the reconciliation process, where you can pass this out of the Senate with only 51 votes, and in the House it's a majority vote as well, as long as the president will sign it. But we stopped a huge tax increase from hitting the American people. We increased the tax credits for people that have kids and this is a tax credit. This actually is not just $2,000 coming off per child. It's now going to go to $2,200 per child coming off. That's going to help a lot of people. Those types of things. We extended what we call the 99 or the 199A stuff, which is for small businesses, so they can compete with corporations. Those are the types of things that we included in this bill, and we made them permanent. That's going to be good. For people that are on Social Security, the vast majority of them, over 80% of them, will actually get a significant tax break on a lot of the income that comes in from Social Security itself. For some people that are low income, and if they're going to buy American cars, they're going to get an additional tax break on those vehicles that they buy if they are put together in America. So I think we've done some things that really are going to help the American public. But something else that we did is we provided a continuum for businesses so that they know that the tax rates aren't going to change unless there is an act of Congress doing it. And that will give them some stability, so they'll know how to do their business challenges for the very near future, and in fact on their long-term planning well out over the 6 to 10 year time period.
I know when the DOJ cuts originally came, people were reaching out to your office, and you had said to me at one point that you guys were working to restore some of those DOJ cuts. I'm curious with Big Beautiful Bill. I mean, it is a pretty sweeping budget bill. If any challenges arise, what the Senate's appetite is going to be to maybe go in and fine-tune some of those if problems arise.
We're not afraid to do that. And remember, these were separate bills. You've got the reconciliation bill, or the Big Beautiful Bill. And then you also had, we call them the rescissions package. And a lot of the rescissions package came from items that have been identified in the DOJ product. That is the one that cut some of the public broadcasting money, a lot of the public broadcasting money out. That's one where I looked at it and found out that, like the money that goes into the Native American reservations for their small little radio stations, there are 4 of them in South Dakota. There's 28 of them total in this part of the country. It's a little over $9.4 million in value, but they shut down because it's over 90% of their funding. And I went back to the White House and to the Office of OMB and said, look, I want to support your rescissions package, but these guys are getting caught in the crossfire. You're mad at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. You're mad at public TV. You're not mad at these little radio stations that you cut them out. And they said, good point. let's see what we can do. And they worked out a deal with us so that we were able to restore funding beginning this next year. So there's been no cut in funding for a lot of these places that would have had no place to go to find resources, the poorest parts of our country. So we fixed that. But yeah, the rescissions package, the first one coming through, a lot of it had to do with areas that literally had come through reconciliation packages that Democrats had passed without any Republican support. But now, as we look at more possible rescission packages, we'll look at them saying, look, if you can find a way to get the work done and save money, great. But if you're actually cutting programs that Congress has, number one, authorized and number two, appropriated, let's talk about that a little bit, because some of those things might be pretty important to a lot of members.
Yeah, one of the other things I'm curious about is just access to rural health care, issues like that. If the big beautiful bill ends up having a major impact on that, you know, we're a very rural state here in South Dakota. Do you, and again, I have to ask you this again, do you think members will be open to looking at that and maybe making some corrections there?
Yeah, but I got to tell you, Medicare does not get touched in this. So for people that are over the age of 65, there's nothing in here that touches Medicare at all. Second of all, when it comes to what we did within the bill itself on Medicaid, it had to do with a lot of the states who were charging what they call a provider tax of over 6.5%. So they were charging the federal government, and when somebody would come in and get a Medicaid bill, the Medicaid bill would get like a sales tax on it of 6.5% that they'd send to the federal government and expect the federal government to pay, which brought money back into the state. Well, then they'd make a deal with the hospital that got this 6.5% and say, you can keep some of it, but you got to kick back the rest of it to the state. Well, South Dakota's not doing that kind of stuff. So here in South Dakota, we're not going to be impacted nearly like what some other states are that were really abusing that program. And so that's where the savings is at that we're talking about on Medicaid. The other piece on it is for people that are up to the age of 65, if they can work. I think most of us say, you know, you really got to be back to work, and then you can keep your Medicaid benefits if you're healthy, and if you're not taking care of somebody who is, you know, dependent on you because they're disabled. But I think that's probably okay with the vast majority of taxpayers. In some areas of our state, we have high unemployment, including on Native American reservations. They're exempt from that particular requirement. So I think we've done a lot to impact the individuals and the states that were really abusing Medicaid and really driving the price on it. In South Dakota, we haven't been doing that. So I don't think you're going to see a huge impact. But we do have one extra little protection device in there, and that's a $50 billion fund to protect rural hospitals that are adversely impacted by this unintentionally.
Yeah, and that $50 billion they can draw from if they are, you know, in some sort of financial distress, they're able to draw from that $50 billion.
That's correct.
Okay. Again, I just want to give you the floor to just...
I will tell you, look, there is no such thing as perfect legislation. We're going to continue to work with people. If they come in and they say that they found something that's a problem, we're more than willing to at least explore it and to see if it's been unintentionally impacted. We had a number of people when DOGE was first coming in back in February and March. We had a number of people that came in and talked to us because they thought that either they had been fired because it said that they were probationary people, and they weren't. They'd actually been given a promotion, but they hadn't been in their new promotion for more than 90 days. We got a lot of those folks reinstated again. We found areas with the farm community where we had a building, and they'd say, well, there's only one person in the building. And we'd say, well, that's because they only need one person in the building, and they're taking care of farmers in a 30-mile area around them. But if you shut the building down, those farmers are going to have to travel 120 miles to get to the next nearest thing. If you need to have 2 people in that building in order to qualify it, you're just adding another person that we really don't need. And most of those we got fixed. We did have some in VA where they had terminated some. The vast majority of those we have been able to get reconciled and back in operation again. So in talking with my folks at the VA in South Dakota, I think we've got those fixed. We did also have some areas where they cut back on some cancer treatment facilities. And those were the first ones we got fixed. They actually had shut down they pulled the plug on websites that had treatment for cancer, the protocols for treatment of cancers for people that were in drug programs or in chemo programs. And the nurses were calling us saying, what am I going to do? I have to check this every day. They just pulled the plug on the entire program. I've got kids, I've got seniors. I've got people that are getting these cancer treatments. That took us about a day to get that fixed. And so, but I don't know if it was our office or somebody else's office, but we were able to make a difference. So I tell people out there, if you found an area that you think is wrong, contact us. And we've had over 500 contacts already, and we've been able to work through those.
Okay. Senator Mike Rounds, again, thank you so much for your time and coming down, sitting with us today. And yeah, that's going to do it.